Nobody Wants This, the show that has everyone buzzing, has us wondering about its Jewishness, about its characters, and about Jews in film and TV in general. Does anyone actually want this? I'm Avi Finegold, and along with Yedida Eisenstat and Matthew Leibl, we are not in heaven. Who's going to go first, Yedida?
Halloween and baseball. Those are the...
Well, we talked about those last week, and I feel like there's probably stuff
we went to a wedding on Thursday night. So my boys, for shtick, we dressed them up in their astronaut costumes at the wedding. So the next day, because it was, air quotes, favorite book character day. Anyway, they went to school the next day. One of them wore his ninja costume and one of them wore his astronaut costume. So this is a little bit of me sort of eating my words and my position, my hard no on Halloween last week. I actually think that their public school handles Halloween really nicely with the Spirit Week. So I sent my astronaut and my ninja to school on Friday.
Your kids celebrated Halloween, is what you're saying.
They did something. They're enjoying the little Kit Kats that are left over from... we had more trick-or-treaters this year than I've ever had before, ever.
They dressed up and they had candy. They had the full Halloween experience.
No. They had Halloween afterwards. They just want a Kit Kat after breakfast. And sometimes I fight that fight, and sometimes I don't.
Just Kit.
And then we were at Sheva Brachot for the same family on Saturday night. And the Sheva Brachot, which were supposed to be like s'mores in a backyard, which I thought was like a great concept, turned into a watch party. So everybody was just inside watching the game. And I left at like the bottom of the 8th, top of the 9th. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go home and go to bed now. And that was, there was a rude awakening on my phone the next morning. I was surprised to see that the Dodgers won and I was pretty bummed. So that was my bad.
Did you just admit to being the jinx, the curse?
Yes, I did.
I think we're going to have, our ratings will probably spike now that this is out there, but
that it was my fault.
This is one of the worst losses in the history of sport.
Yeah, it was pretty terrible.
Like, it transcends baseball, it transcends history, and it was a country, and you're the one who jinxed them by walking away from the game.
All right. I'm sure there were other me's. I wasn't the only me in this mix.
I don't know. Not many people walk away 2 outs to go in the World Series, Yedida, because they're a little sleepy. But I'm not going to blame you. I'm just saying the coincidence is out there now, and we might get, reaction.
Back up a second, Matthew. Friday night was probably the toughest choice you may have had to make in your entire life, choosing between Shabbat dinner and Halloween with your kids and the World Series.
We usually get together as an extended family, 4 generations, because my Baba Kinahor is 96 and a half and still with us. And we usually do this at my parents' place, the Bab and Zeta now. But we moved everything. We postponed everything. The Bab and Zeta, they were doing their watching. My sister, she was doing her watching. And then I graciously gave up trick-or-treat escorting so that my wife could take them and I could stay back and ostensibly hand out candy, but also keep an eye on the game. It hurts. It will hurt for a while. It really, I wasn't kidding when we said to Yedida, like, the next day I felt very like I'd had life force sucked out of me. I don't know how else to describe it. Like the epic deflation of oh man. But I've picked myself up. I'm okay.
That's what we do.
Right. That's good.
Glad to hear.
Avi, was your Shabbat dinner interrupted by trick-or-treaters?
No, but the preparation for cooking Friday afternoon was very much interrupted, which is fine. Again, we had a big bag of candy. The kids were really happy to give out. The first group that rang the bell, I went to the door and I'm handing out candy, and this kid looks at me and says, "Oh, you're wearing a kippah. I'm Jewish too." And I was like, the ghost of Matthew Leibl is going to haunt me forever.
Hey, first of all, I'm still hanging around.
And then I'm walking around. I'm walking to shul Friday night in our neighborhood, and there's tons of kids, and I keep passing congregant after friend of mine with their kids that are traditional enough, but they're going out trick or treating, and it's important to them. I was like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. All right. Let us get to our main topic for the day, which is discussing Nobody Wants This.
Ever since October 7th, 2023, Muslim and Jewish communities in Canada have been torn apart.
I've known you for 20 years. You've been at my house for Shabbat supper, I don't know how many times. And for 1 second, you can't put down your friend and just hold my hand?
We're fed a constant stream of Jews and Muslims talking at each other, about each other, but rarely do we hear them talking to each other.
There was, why are you doing this? What's the benefit of doing this?
This podcast aims to do something different. I'm Avi Finegold, a rabbi and a writer with the Canadian Jewish News.
I'm Yafa Sakeja, a Canadian-Palestinian entrepreneur and volunteer with the Canadian Friends of Standing Together.
We're sitting down with Jews and Muslims, Israelis and Palestinians, from coast to coast and across the political divide, having difficult conversations in good faith.
We are not the Israeli government. Palestinians are not Hamas.
This is the place where we're both supposed to end up, Israeli and Palestinian, Arab and Jewish.
Subscribe to In Good Faith, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hi everyone, I'm Joanne.
I'm Noah.
Did you know there's a rabbi here?
No shit.
Yeah.
Where?
He has a beard, and he was definitely judging me.
Sounds like a rabbi.
There's not a Jewish bone in her body, unless you put one in her.
You're the rabbi?
It's hot, right?
Look, everybody's talking about this show. You know, last season 1 was kind of niche and it sort of blew up. And now it's the thing. And Jews, non-Jews. Let's start with you, Matthew. Tell us a little bit about what Nobody Wants This is about. And why do you think people have had such strong reactions to it?
Okay, yeah. And I think when I was checking even today before our taping, it was like number 3 show on Netflix right now or something like that. Like, you're not kidding. It's everywhere. Noah is a rabbi who in season 1 met and fell in love with Joanne, who is not Jewish and is a podcaster about kind of like relationships and stuff, a podcast with her sister. And they got together last season. And at the end, he kind of had to choose. And the big kind of back and forth, what they established early is, can their relationship move forward if she doesn't convert? That's really kind of like what's at the pull of season 2. And at the same time, there are elements of like of his career as a rabbi held back potentially because she won't convert. So, I mean, there's a lot of other elements for his life too. And then there are other characters who go through things, but that's like at the core for them, right? As for why it's so popular, honestly, I think it's so popular because Adam Brody and Kristen are really big stars. So I think that's the first part too, is there's huge brand name recognizability. And I also think it's really good. I think that's part of it as well too. I don't think the Jewishness of it is the reason why it's so popular.
So you think it's popular because it's like a bubblegummy rom-com?
Well, I don't care for the bubblegummy. Like, I wouldn't call it that.
You don't think it's bubblegummy?
No, I think it has so much more substance than that. In fact, I think it's not that at all. But I think its appeal is because of the actors and the format. I think Jewish people are interested in it. And I think the story is an interesting one that many people can relate to if they know Jewish people. But I think, yeah, I don't know that that's what's drawing people, I think.
So I want to name just for our listeners who may not have watched the first season, it has like a Romeo and Juliet kind of trope in it that they are star-crossed lovers, right? He is a rabbi and his career is going to be held back by his being in a relationship with a woman who is not Jewish. And so career-wise and also family-wise, right? His mother is a huge thorn in the side of their relationship, trying to break them up, right? There's a lot of negative energy coming at the relationship from his people. And also like Joanne's sister, who's her side of the family, Morgan, also is very skeptical about the relationship and expresses that and is not especially supportive, I think we can say. So it's really like the two of them kind of against the world, but also they seem to have identified that it is really important to him that she will eventually convert, and you can see him struggling with that. I think it's an interesting, I don't know how accurate treatment of interfaith relationships with Jews, but I also am wondering a lot about, is the only reason he can't be with her because he's a rabbi? Right, that it's his career.
Like as opposed to just a regular Jewish Joe.
That is the level at which Hollywood has to do something in order to establish a dilemma, because a regular individual marrying somebody not Jewish, it's not a dilemma anymore, right?
And you guys know that it's based on a life, right? Like Aaron Foster created the story, but her husband's not a rabbi. But when they pitched the story, like they were very honest about the making. When they pitched the story, the studio execs were like, the stakes need to be higher. Right. So the average Jew, the stakes aren't high enough. So they had to make him a rabbi. They had to make the relation. And I like the way they've done it. I think that they've leaned well into characters and situations that they ring true to me. They're authentic. Like, it's very, very common that the Jewish mother is skeptical, to say the least, to hostile, somewhere in between, with the non-Jewish partner when they arrive on scene. Like, I've seen this play out. We read some interesting articles where some people, like critics, accused, I hadn't heard any Jewish pushback. I thought everybody loved it. And so I was surprised to hear that some people thought that they played into stereotypes. And I just don't agree. I just do not agree. I think that they find a nice balance between ringing true. Any other movie I can think of where there are Jewish characters or Jewish scenes, they're inaccurate. This show, I think, has done a lot of things. Like on one of the articles I read, they went through and they get it right. They get little details right. There's good teachings. There's good stuff.
That could be true for the ritual stuff and the portrayal of Judaism, which I'm going to distinguish from their portrayal of Jewish people. I think that the sister-in-law and the mother are like terrible, offensive stereotypes. That doesn't mean they're not perhaps authentic, but also Morgan, her sister, also is a terrible stereotype. So like the stereotypes run the gamut, just some of them irk me more than others. So I'm
like, why though? Like, I don't see it that way. I just see them as ringing true. Like I think like the Jewish mother-in-law who is very hostile and then is scarfing pork in the kitchen is very, very relatable.
But hold on, I'm not talking about the interfaith thing anymore. I'm talking about the portrayal of Jewish women as overbearing and evil.
Tova Felcher, right, who plays the mom and the sister-in-law.
Dina,
They're, I mean, except for that she mellows out a bit, in the middle. Like, I found that they are really trying to make them such caricatures of what it is. And I couldn't figure out if that was the case because it's a show and you have to heighten everything. Right. And when you have a Jewish mother character, that's what you put in there, because otherwise, if you put some sweetness in there, people don't quite get that. Yes, she can be sweet, but she can also be mean. And that like there's nuance there. And in a comedy, in a half-hour comedy, there's no space for nuance. And I think that some of it was really heavy-handed on the Jewish part, but not in a good way, in a way that's like, do you really need this much exposition about what Purim is? Or can you just say this is a Purim party? When you have a legal show, procedural, when you have a medical drama, you don't have nearly as much exposition about what's going on. The assumption is this is a camera on people's lives, and they don't sit and explain to first-year medical students what they're supposed to already know. They just go with the flow, and that's part of the language, and you move on. And here, I just felt like all the Jewish stuff was so like, we're going to teach you about Judaism using this show, and it just felt weird. And as a result, what ended up feeling was that the Jewish part wasn't really integrated. It was like, this is a rom-com, and there's Judaism around there because that's the setting, and there was no like real integration other than the like, oh, intermarriage. That's the only thing that comes up as like really part of the plot.
And I want to like the treatment of why it's important to him that she be Jewish, again, seems to mostly only focus on his career and nothing else, right? Nothing about like building a Jewish life and building a Jewish home or raising Jewish children.
No, he talks about that.
Plenty of people.
There's a whole scene where he talks about why he wanted to be a rabbi. It's in there. It's in there.
In the first season, which I have not been rewatching. Okay. So no, I mean, I didn't see it come up in the writing, but it just feels to me that their treatment of Judaism is very superficial. And like in the conversations where they're trying to like negotiate, what their life could look like, I don't see them that that's what they're talking about, what that means.
It is a television show for a not Jewish audience. It's
right.
on Netflix.
So that's
like they have to exaggerate stuff. Like it has, but the point is like, are the situations authentic? Are the situations and the characters realistic? And to me, like I've done baby namings where the parents were super clueless and they brought me in because they were like, do it for us. Be Jewish for us. So many times the rabbi has to do that.
Is intermarriage still even like a taboo in those families?
Yeah. I think that even though there are a lot of people who are much more open and obviously I do a lot of ceremonies where these families get together and things work out are very positive. I think there is still taboo is the perfect word. I don't know if it's partly because for so long there have been so many sermons against intermarriage. You know, I remember them when I was young. Like it's just always been this message that it will lead to the death of the Jewish people, that it's a guaranteed terrible thing. And some people believe that, some people don't. I mean, it's just out there. So I think that when you use words like that to describe something, whether it's prevalent or not, it's out there that it's both prevalent and, you know, at the very least frowned upon. But from one family to the next, you know, it changes. But it does seem to be one of those things where even though the family is not super observant, there's just a certain element of, I would call it shucksness, disappointment, that it's not a Jewish person who just kind of like knows all the handshakes, knows the terms, kind of knows, as one of my friends put, like knows the songs from our childhood and just kind of grew up with these things. Like it's just kind of a knowing, a sense. And then it's also so ridiculous in some ways because who's to say that any of the three of us had the same songs of the same childhood and we're all Jews, right? Like it's, I don't know. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that for so many generations, it was bad. So it's ingrained. Like it's ingrained in that even if it's not, even if you don't keep kosher, even if you don't keep Shabbat, no one really went to synagogue and heard sermons about how not keeping kosher is killing the Jewish people. I didn't hear a lot of those the way I heard the intermarriage ones, is I guess the way I would put it.
The fact that that's one of the primary messages that people hear, baseline marry Jewish, is a failure of modern Judaism. Because it's not sending out a positive message of like, here's why Judaism is great. And here's why you should make Judaism a centerpiece of your life and learn about it and think about it and live your life Jewishly, right? It's like a very negative message instead of a positive one of like, here's a beautiful way to live your life and prism through which to view the world. And the rabbis have like really deep, interesting thoughts that like can inform your life today. I just think that that's like a huge failure.
I remember hearing a quote that put it so succinctly. There's a guy named Shane Claiborne, and he said, we knew what we were against. We just didn't know what we were for. And if that's your whole Judaism is what it's against, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
There.
My wife, Heather, said that I should say this, actually. I almost forgot. And as I mentioned, and she says I can talk about this, she converted to Judaism. Now, she grew up in Toronto and she had some very close Jewish friends. And when I met her, she was she just I love the teaching. It's in the show about like all the souls being at Sinai. I've always felt that way about her. But she made this point. She's like, if either of our boys, who again are 6 and 4, brought home somebody and we're going to make their life with somebody who wasn't Jewish, my wife was kind of like, this is a big deal to me. Like, this is my life. I made a huge change for this. I made a huge, like the study she went through, the soul searching, everything. Like it was hers. It was, and every family can have, I could see every family having something like that, you know, because of history, because of persecution, because of conversion, who knows? And when somebody brings home somebody and says, I love this person, but it's at odds with that fundamental thing in the family, whoo! And then you add on top of it, like generations of rhetoric saying, this is the death of our people. It's heavy. And that's why I think the show handles it all so beautifully, like truthfully and beautifully. I'm happy with it. But from a show's perspective, season 2 frustrated me. I need more from a show, not the Jewish part, but from like a show, from the characters.
I think we're getting at a few things here. Avi and I think that the portrayal could be thicker and it doesn't feel very deep to us. But maybe the showrunners, and that article, I think it was in JTA, talked about how they did consult with a rabbi who, taught them how to do everything. And that, maybe that is the kind of Judaism that they were trying to portray. And that's the authenticity that I think Matthew is putting his finger on. I'm a little bit more concerned about the stakes of the show, right? This like mass presentation of Jews for a North American audience, that like the big central thing is whether or not a rabbi can intermarry. And it gets to this ancient claim that maybe has some truth to it, that Jews are clannish, right? That we stick to each other. And it doesn't, as far as I can tell, except maybe for this one scene that you pointed to that I have no recollection of, do a treatment of like why this person's Judaism is important and valuable to them.
But aren't we clannish? Like, isn't that what we kind of are and have been?
Well, that's definitely like a negative framing for it. There are other more positive ways to frame it.
I don't think of that as like is that a negative way to describe it? But I'm just trying to say like facts. Like intermarriage is against the rules as far as the rules are set up, right?
But not all Jews follow the rules. And I think that the intermarriage rate in America now is over 50%. So
of course, right. Which is why there is the tension, which is why I think Jewish audiences like the show.
Yedida pointed out was that the tension is purely because he is a rabbi. And that's all that he says. His job is the fulcrum upon which the relationship is going to be. And it's all about the job and the career. And it's not about like, hey, I believe in this and I want to be with somebody who believes in this in the same way that I believe in it. There's no,
but
like,
I think you guys are I think you guys are dismissing that. Like, I think that's in there. And I think that the show is more about her. And so that doesn't keep getting hammered.
No, because
from a story standpoint.
Because the dilemma keeps coming up.
The dilemma for
for the couple, for whether they should get married or not, whether they
from
should
his
stay together.
perspective.
Yeah. It's not about his set of values that he says, I have a unique, specific set of values, and I'm not saying you're a bad person, but this set of values is what makes me Jewish, and you don't have those, and that's what makes it a dilemma for me. And he's not saying no, but all it ends up being is about, my job, or my parents, and there's no internal like discussion that is externalized where he goes and says, look, you're a great person. The reason why I have a hard time with this is because you don't share all of this stuff, and that's important to me.
He doesn't say it. That's a good point, though. Like, he never really ever challenges her in the show with the Jewishness for him again as part of it. That's a fair point. A totally fair criticism.
Also, like, it's a rom-com, so they're supposed to be together, right? The whole drama is like, will they, won't they? So
of course.
Because you always want love to win, whatever's going to get in the way has to be bad.
Yeah.
I actually think Morgan, the non-Jewish, super skeptical, unsympathetic sister, has sort of like the most real take, right? Like, she knows her sister. She seems to have like some understanding of what being married to a rabbi requires and entails. And she's like, Joanne, this is not for you, but like, they love each other, they fall in love. So now we're cheering for the relationship, even though like, I think Morgan's right. Like, this doesn't make much sense.
So I think that again, like I see these as story things. Like, I don't see them as Jewish things. And I also think that any Jewish person in an interfaith relationship relates to the story, even though he's a rabbi. Like, because the characters, again, I don't think they're stereotypes. Because the characters, I think, ring true. Because the Shabbat dinner where they're sitting around, like, it doesn't have to be your Shabbat dinner, but it reminds you of your Shabbat dinner. It feels like a Shabbat dinner, and therefore this is a relatable situation. That's why I think Jewish people especially like the show.
This is where I'm with you, Matthew, in that caricatures sometimes are shorthand. So you often see that in Hollywood or in any other sort of place, where you have to say this is a Jewish person and they have a cameo that's like they're on for 2 minutes. You have to sort of set it up like this. But in this situation, right, the Judaism is throughout everything. And so I feel like you have an ability to tone down the like caricature piece.
I get all of your points. It's kind of like people who are lawyers who hate all the legal shows you mentioned before because they wrap them all up in an hour and there's no actual sense of a legal timeline, and people think they learn the legal system and how to be a trial attorney, and it actually isn't an authentic experience or representation at all. I actually think there's more of that in this that is good. Yeah. And I think that it's hard because we're not just Jewish people, but we're Jewish people who know a lot of these details so many people don't glom onto these things. I think what they do glom onto is a very, very positive show for Jewish people in the non-Jewish world at a time when it is so not like that. And I think that what they have to do in season 3 is find a very, very sensitive way to bring up Israel. I think they have to address this in the show, even though it's not been there, because it's just in the climate. I think they have to find a way to do it because, like, what conversation doesn't include that in modern times? But other than that, like, I think it really is, like, I don't think my non-Jewish friends, and I sent you guys a text that another non-Jewish friend who watched the show folding laundry was like, please tell me you've watched this. This guy reminds me of you. Like, I think it is all positive associations. Like, I don't think people are coming away from that with like a yuck feeling or a revulsion or like, oh man, Jews are trying to take all the money and stuff that Kanye accused of. Like, I just don't, I'm trying to be very open-minded to the people who have these criticisms that I whiffed on, but I really feel strongly that non-Jewish audiences are coming away with a very positive attitude and a very just kind of like that it's authentic. Especially if they know somebody, hey, look, when I met my wife converted, when I met my wife, my parents were way better than the parents in this show. I can tell you that.
As are most parents. Most parents are not.
Yes, because again, like you said, there is
people to their potential in-laws.
Yes. That woman, it seems to be terrible to everyone though. Like she's terrible to her Jewish kid in the like to her Jewish daughter-in-law in the second season too, right? Like, yes, I think that there is something to be said, like you said, for the over the topness because it's Hollywood. But I do still feel like the situations save it for me. The relatability of the situations, I think. But I hear what you guys are saying. I just feel like I wonder if we just know too much. What do you call it, Avi? Inside baseball, inside Judaism? Mm-hmm. That we're looking for things that we'll always be able to, like we catch the Tzoharayim thing and people just don't even notice it.
So Matthew, I really, really hope that you're right. And one thing also, just like, I think that what it does do, and one thing that it's playing at is this idea that like Jews are like everybody else and that we can mix and we can bond and we all can have families together. And that definitely is bearing out in reality. And I think this is a variation on a theme sort of our Halloween episode last week, talking about like where those boundaries are and how we maneuver them and how we let the outside in and how we go into the outside world. And like, this is what it is to be a Jew. It's to maneuver this while maintaining one's own commitments and identity. And in that sense, I think we see Rabbi Noah trying to do that.
Yeah, the good characters have depth. I think you guys are coming around. I think you're coming around on the show.
No. All right. Let's get on to textual healing.
Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing. Let's get biblical. Tell me a parsha, and we'll make it physical. Textual healing. It's time for some textual healing.
Yedida, what is this week's Parsha, and what do you have to say about it?
So this week, we have another super jam-packed Parsha. Right, it opens up, Abraham has circumcised himself, no small feat, and entered into a covenant for the third time with God, and it ends with the Akedah story, with the binding of Isaac. I want to focus in my nugget for today on a 3-verse transition in the middle of chapter 18. So Abraham shows all this hospitality to these 3 men who turn out to be God's messengers, and they're bringing different messages to him. And then after, they've had a nice barbecue, Abraham walks them out, and we learn hospitality from Abraham, that you should walk your guests out. But there's this sort of 3-verse transition from Abraham hosting the man angels to Abraham and God negotiating whether or not God will destroy Sodom. And in these verses, we sort of like get to hear God's inner monologue. And in God's inner monologue, he says, like, should I tell Abraham my plan to destroy Sodom? Can I really hide this from him? And
God deliberates because he has just entered into this covenantal relationship with Abraham, and God seems to understand that not telling Abraham that his plan to destroy Sodom would be sort of a breach of that trust in that burgeoning relationship. And also in this verse, we sort of get insight into what God has chosen Abraham for, right? So last time and a couple of weeks ago, God destroyed the world because it was full of wickedness and violence. And now in Sodom, we also get some insight. We're about in the next chapter, we get some insight into how terrible Sodom is and why God is going to destroy it. But this is a more potentially, it will be a more minor destruction than the entire flood. But in the course of this, God explains that he's chosen Abraham because he knows Abraham, he's chosen him, he's distinguished him so that he will instruct or command his house and his descendants to keep the way of the Lord. And then the Torah says, what is the way of the Lord? To do righteousness and justice, and thereby God can keep all of his promises to Abraham. And so this is the job of God's covenantal people that we identify with. And this is the reason why Abraham and his descendants are chosen. And then in the next, as Abraham and God negotiate what will happen in Sodom, the argument that God ultimately says yes to, Abraham says to him, will the God of justice not do justice? Right? And Abraham sort of throws the requirement of justice back at God. And it turns out there are no righteous people in Sodom and it should be destroyed. There were not, 10, 5, however. But this is the job. And this is what I think nobody wants this misses. That there's like a calling, there's substance, there's something that like we are called to do. And basically all of our tradition is trying to figure out how to do this. How to fulfill, how to live up to this mission. And okay, like whatever, it's a rom-com. But I think that even Jews like miss that there's something really rich here and chaval. And it's like it's really too bad.
When Abraham is arguing with God after the part that Yedida just talked about to spare Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom and Amorah, and he starts with, what if there are 50? Righteous people? What if there are 40? What if there are 30? And then he stops after he does 10, right? And I was told that this is where they came up with the idea that 10 is a minyan, because 10 is kind of the minimum you need for a community to affect meaningful change. And that the idea of where does it say that you need 10 for a minyan, the origin is this story. Is that true? Is that a true teaching?
It's half true. It's that one, but there's also a verse in Bamidbar, in Shalach, when they talk about the spies, and there's 12 spies, but 2 of them are good, and Moshe refers to them as Edah HaRa'ah, right? This evil community.
Witness.
And so, and Edah, like not aid, but
community.
Edah, like, and the idea being that like, a community is a minimum number of community is 10 people. Right. So that's another,
Right. Well, the Abraham story is first in the Torah, so we can kind of give it a little bit credit for getting there. So I was kind of like that teaching, but this parsha, which I don't think we gave the name, Vayera,
my bad,
it is epic. Like last week's parsha is the start of Abraham, but this is his like shining moments. Like it just feels like one of those, all-star albums where like song after song is just epic. There's a lot of meat on the bone, as they say in this parsha, for sure. So what are you chewing on? What kind of meat are you chewing on off this bone there, Finegold?
So speaking of the Akedah, I came across an amazing Rashi, which is really, really famous. And of course, Yedida is here, our resident Rashi expert, to tell us a little bit about this Rashi. It's the one where Avraham starts having a dialogue with God, when he says, take your son, your only one, the one which you love, Isaac, right? What does Rashi tell us, Yedida?
Oh, this is amazing. So it's also in chapter 2 of my doctoral dissertation, where you can read more pages than you want on this. It plays on like this whole narrative. Your son, and Abraham says, well, I have 2 sons, and the one you love. And he says, well, I love both of them. Kachna et bincha yechidcha, your only one. He says, well, this one is the only one from his mother, and this one is the only one from his mother. Asher ahavta, that you love. And he's like, well, I love them both. And then finally, it's Yitzchak. God identifies him. And I think there's a lot going on there, but Right. I talk all the time about how we miss things because we know how the story goes and we're taught this from children, but there's like actually a ton of drama here. Yishmael is raised for 13 years to be the heir of the covenant. Abraham for 13 years expects that all of this is going to pass through Yishmael. And then, right, like we're told right at the beginning of this week's parsha that no, Sarah is going to have a son and it's going to go through him. But that's crazy. And so when we get to the Akedah, right, and Rashi and the rabbis also talk about like, well, how old is Yitzchak? It's even more dramatic at the Akedah because, okay, so for 13 years we think it's going to be Yishmael, and then Yitzchak's born, and we think it's going to be Yitzchak, and then God tells Abraham to sacrifice Yitzchak. Like the whole thing is off the hook. So, Avi, is that what you were getting at?
No. So all of that is the preamble to this commentary that I just came across, and it blew my mind, and I had to share it. So Rabbi Yitzchak Volozhin, who is the son of Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, who was the founder of the modern yeshiva movement several hundred years ago, was a big commentator, has this like totally like this interpretation, like so simple and yet undermines the entire Rashi, where he takes that entire dialogue and he doesn't see it as Avraham trying to figure out which son he is supposed to offer, but he says he's getting ready to offer them both at the same time. And it's like, if you look at the dialogue, all of a sudden, it fits perfectly. He's like, God says, take your son. And Avraham says, I check raise. I take my son and I raise you my other son, right? And he's like, your only son. They're both my only son. I'm going to give you both. You're the one you love. I love them both, right? Like, and then at Yitzhak, oh, I guess you only want me to give one, right? And it's like, there's this like, it's really disturbing. The way that I saw the interpretation was that like Avraham really clearly is aware that he has such a debt to God that he cannot pay it back, but this is the only way that he can see the ability to do that. But I've never seen such a subversive reading of a Rashi as this one, and I just thought it was so brilliant that I had to like share it.
The call to, I remember learning this. The story, like the Avraham story of his life, begins in chapter, 12, 13, with Lech Lecha, which we talked about last week, and ends with the Akedah, right? That's the last scene after that he dies. And both of those two scenes start with the word Lech Lecha, the only place in the entire Torah where we see the word. And actually, both calls from God to Avraham are kind of three-parted, because that one, which we talked about, was like, et bincha, et yechidcha, asher ahavta, et Yitzchak. And when he tells him, what does he say last week? It's like, go to the land. Yeah. I actually, my interpretation, because I studied this a lot at one point, I had to write about it. I actually think that God phrased the call at the end of his life in exactly the same way that God phrased the call at the beginning of Avraham's journey, to see if Avraham would pick up on it and use Lech Lecha as a real tip-off, because we don't talk like that anywhere else. And that's how Avraham knew that he wasn't going to actually have to kill Isaac, because he tipped him off. And it shows that at the end of the journey, Avraham had figured all this out. And the clinching moment for me is that when Avraham is about to do it, the angel has to call him twice. And I never liked that. And I was never satisfied with why would the angel have to call him as if he didn't stop and was going to do it, even though the angel called him once. And I had this kind of subversive reading inspired by Avi's take, that in that moment, Avraham actually flipped the tables and tested God. Because everyone always says, like, how did Avraham go through with this? And my question was always, how could God put him through this? After everything he'd proven in this parsha and last week's, why did God need this as a final test? I thought that was so brutal. I don't like the way God treats Moshe, and I don't like the way God treats Avraham. Full disclosure.
Thank you for listening to Not in Heaven this week. Our producer and editor is Zachary Kauffman. Michael Fraiman is the executive producer. To catch every episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support our show, consider making a donation to the CJN at thecjn.ca/donate.